Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our second hour today will be with Frank Hund from MakePro X. So I'm really excited about that. So if you've got questions about that, go ahead and go out to MakePro X, take a look at it, and throw your questions in for the second hour. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitchell, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. Robert Shoji from Los Angeles, California, has a question. As a follow-up to yesterday's discussion, what are the pros and cons to the various video format delivery containers, MP4, AVI, MOV, etc.?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, there are some preferences. AVI is preferred more on, they do work across platform, more on the Windows side of the world, and of course MOV is more welcome in the Mac side of the world, although both platforms can play both sides. But they may not be able to interpret all variations of the types of compression that are contained in those wrappers. So a lot of them haven't, the decoders haven't been updated in quite some time on Windows for the MOV. And AVI is a pretty much long dead wrapper, but it's still around, and it's working. MP4 is probably the safest to go cross-platform with because both of them keep those up to date and decode mostly H.264 in that wrapper. So that would be the best in my opinion.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I have seen a couple programs where they, where if you bring in, I think it was the AVI, or no, well, anyway, you bring in a couple formats, you're actually going to have to pay for licensing for that because they're not going to cover the licensing anymore. I know with the Windows machines, if you bring it into Windows Media Player, some of those formats you'll also have to download additional codecs, which do cost extra.
Yeah. One of the things you want to kind of distinguish is there's lots of different ways to think about this, but I'll simplify it to say that there are three big versions of what you're doing. There's an acquisition format, there's a mezzanine format, and there's a delivery format. And so that's how I view a lot of these things. My acquisition format is I want to gather as much data as I possibly can. I'm never going to get to go back. And so this is going to be your Red RAW, your Blackmagic RAW, your Apple ProRes 444. All of these are going to be, the highest end DNX, that type of thing. Then once you start working with it, you may end up with a mezzanine thing. And pretty much at least in production that I work in, there are three mezzanine formats that we see, and that is Apple ProRes, DNX, and MXF. And so these are containers that hold a lot of the stuff, MXF being probably the most flexible of all of those, holding the most amount of data. But the one that we see the most, probably 80%, is Apple ProRes. We see DNX some of the time. The high-end stuff is MXF. DNX shows up every once in a while. That's Avid's format. And it may show up a lot more in Hollywood. I just don't I don't see it. So DNX could be much higher than that. But in corporate and general production, we see Apple ProRes a lot, in this area. And then you have the delivery formats, which could still be a dot move. So Apple ProRes is a dot move, but you have the H.264 compression, and then you have what are you going to wrap that in? And so that gets wrapped into an MP4, an MOV. So those are the types of things that go out. The AVI, as stated before, you see it every once in a while, and you're just like, you got to figure out what to do with it. How do I convert it out of AVI? But you definitely don't deliver it to anyone that way.
Windows can still open AVIs, but probably Max. Nothing else.
Yeah, and the one thing that will open almost every container is VLC. So that's the one thing that you want to, almost all of us have on our computers is VLC, because if you don't know what it's going to do or how it's going to work, VLC will usually open it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Doing some trailer work with the folks in Hollywood, and everything I get is ProRes 444.
Yeah. ProRes is a very popular format. A lot of folks will work and continue to work in 444. It has 12-bit, which means that especially as a mezzanine, and what we're talking about as mezzanine is this is the file we're going to keep passing about between us, to work on something. And it typically, that mezzanine, while your acquisition format oftentimes will be in log, which means that it's trying to protect the highlights and the shadows, and so it's got a bit of a curve to it. So the log is more like this instead of like a linear out, and that's a very simplified version to describe it. But we're trying to protect these highlights and that's why it looks oftentimes very desaturated. It looks very, it looks like there's no blacks and no pure whites. It's because the log format is trying to protect all those. And for a little while, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it became the cool thing to put your videos up on YouTube with log. And I'm pretty sure it's just because we had a lot of creators that didn't know that they were shooting in log or decided that they liked it, but it was not a particularly scientific way of approaching it. They just didn't know what to do with it, and they put it up anyway. Go ahead, Courtney.
I had a question for you, Alex, because I don't do this that much. Once you transcode to a mezzanine file that's, let's say, ProRes 444 is your mezzanine, do you ever go back to the original to conform for color, for coloring? So somebody maintains that link. It maintains that link to the original footage.
It depends on what you're delivering and who you're delivering it to. When we really, for the highest solutions that we have, where we're doing a bunch of interviews and it's all going to go out in potentially HDR, a lot of times we never really leave that mezzanine format. So all the footage just stays in Resolve as Blackmagic RAW or stays somewhere else as that original format in the editor, and then we keep on working with it, and we add linear stuff back into it, and over top of it and with it, with the graphics, but we never get rid of the original capture data. It definitely makes the project much heavier. So it's those are big projects. They're terabytes of data, and you need a powerful machine to play back all the channels. But once you get over 3 or 4 channels, it starts to get a little sluggish. So those are the challenges, but we've definitely seen folks convert. I think if you convert those to Apple ProRes 44444 or 4x4, I don't think you're going to get much difference. And there's a lot of data there. There's 12 bits of color data. So you can still make color correction and so on and so forth from there. But I usually try to keep it in its original format or access to the original plates. If you try to go back and conform, it becomes very cumbersome. It depends on how complicated the edit is to go back and get the original files, but you can. Absolutely. And we have some people that edit.
If you've maintained the metadata throughout, you have to maintain that linkage back to the original. Otherwise, once you sever the metadata, you're lost.
And there's even some problems that we've had, as like, for instance, if even with Blackmagic, you might create proxies that you can edit quickly, but if it's too much for the CPU, you'll lose sync, which is amazing. Anyway, next question.
John Preto from Las Vegas. Office Hour Space 2023 is in the design phase. The current plan is to upscale the 1960 NOVA Payloader, complete with clear tube at the top of the 19-foot tall rocket. We want to put a 360-degree camera in the tube and stream. Ideas?
Go ahead, John.
So Alex and I have been talking about this. He thought it'd be good to put this question in. And we're looking at a couple different cameras, but the question is, what do they output live? And then we've got different choices to transmit those signals down to the ground. So I just wanted.
Yeah, so some of the Thetas, I believe, have an HDMI output. And so those are that's the easiest one to use. Now, I don't think that they're as high a resolution as you may want out of those, but most of these cameras don't have an HDMI output. So I think that, like, there's the Insta360 X2, which looks promising, but I don't believe it has any kind of HDMI. In fact, I don't even think the newest Thetas have it. These are the, I can't remember which one this is, but this is an example of one of the Thetas. And I think this might be the S version. But anyway, and so what's nice about these is that they're relatively small. They do have a quarter 20 on the bottom. They have an HDMI out. It's like some micro HDMI that comes out of that. And so they make it a little easier to rig, and they are curved. So if you want to build a case to really hold on to it, you're going to have to probably scan it, and make sure, and build something that's kind of custom to it. There's some buttons up the side. You have to kind of take it into account. The other cool thing about the Theta is it's an open architecture, so there's an API for it. So you can build all kinds of things. If you want an Arduino somewhere in there that is talking to this thing and running it for you, you can do that. So they have a very, very open, I think it's kind of an Android-based platform that lots of people write software for. So
what's the output look like? Is it a giant anamorphic image? Is that what they
it's
do?
It's a Mercator projection. So basically, if you so what you get out of it is, I mean, technically if you take the raw output from it, it'll be two, the two spheres. But what it'll put out of the HDMI should be a Mercator projection out. So it's basically like if you take a sphere and you unwrap it, things across the top and the bottom will look really, really stretched, which should be okay for you because that'll be the rocket. But then everything else, the things that'll look the most normal are across the equator. Then things start to get stretched from there. But there's lots of software that will unwrap that Mercator projection for you. That's a very standard transmission.
Live,
version.
real time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's lots of, and I can't, I don't know what the current ones are. I haven't had to do that for a little while, but there's, I'll do some research for you on it. But there's definitely there's a lot of, there was a company called Video, VID. Yeah. And they have a live video platform. I don't know what their business model is today. I mean, we worked with them years ago, and they have a way to stretch that back out, and even add graphics. We used to add graphics into the Mercator with their software, and so that's the one we used for, again, adding graphics, doing green screen, doing all kinds of other stuff inside of a Mercator projection. But there's lots of software that'll do. I mean, the math around a Mercator is relatively simple. From a transform from basically polar to rectangular coordinates. So it's not hard to pull that out. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I have the Insta360, and I use
Does it have an HDMI
for
out?
a lot. It does not have an HDMI out, so you would have to go through the USB to make it happen. But the bigger thing, and I've talked with John about this already, is you're ending up putting that into a clear tube that's going to go up really high into a high temp or a low temperature atmosphere, which could cause a whole bunch of problems, frosting up of the glass, being able to actually have this lens project out and actually see what's going on out there. I was thinking about it a little bit more, and I was wondering, is a 360 the best option? Maybe dual 180s, where you can put a 180 on top of the rocket or in the rocket, and then one towards the bottom of the rocket to really cover the whole thing. But the bigger thing is just how you can get this thing, and then I'm assuming the tube is going to be about there, so this can project out of the plastic or whatever.
It's 12-inch cylinder.
Yeah.
12-inch cylinder.
And that's the one concern that I have on using these types of cameras instead of like a GoPro spherical or something like that.
I'm just thinking about what Jeffrey said. And I'm thinking about some other. I'm just wondering whether. It's an interesting puzzle. So, like, for instance, Kodak, I don't know if they still make it or not, but I have them. If you want to test them, I'll send them to you, John, because I haven't used them for years. Kodak had two 180s. I mean, it had a 180 that had a mount that you could put the two of them together, so to do a 360. Just thinking about what Jeffrey said is that you could theoretically put it in the fuselage where you have it once. I wouldn't even do top and bottom. I would do just having them stick out of the fuselage. So you just have two 180 lenses on either side of the fuselage. You would end up with some kind of stitching issues that you might have to figure out, with that. But that could be a theoretically, you would get a lot of data. I might do both just because it's a test. But the cool thing about it is if you only do 180, we have to think about it. But some of these, I mean, like, and I don't know if these are, one of the things that's really interesting is like if you look at so that you wouldn't, if you really wanted the VR experience of going up, you would need the Theta, or you would need something like that if you wanted it to be live. If you want to get that experience, you might be able to get 180 lenses that are sticking out of either side of the fuselage that are grabbing almost all of it. But I don't know if it would stitch back together well. You might have to stitch. You could definitely bring them back to a rectilinear view and then pan around in it and stuff like that on either side, which would be kind of cool. The cool thing about it is when it's not a 360 camera, you may get higher frame rates because it's not having to stitch those and process them. So, like for instance, most of these are max out at, and I think that the Theta is maxing out at 30 frames a second. But some of these action cameras with 180 degree lenses might go up to 120 or 240 frames a second on the way up, which would be, 240 frames a second on the rocket, especially at the launch, would be cool, of what it looks like. So, yeah, thinking about it, and again, I might say since you're still building the rocket and it's not something you're buying, maybe all of the above. Putting a couple different camera systems in, see what camera systems end up working, because we can take a look at it and see how it looks, but you won't know until you launch it. And so I think that there could be it'd be really cool to turn the rocket into kind of a camera rocket where you have like two 180s on either side. You have a 360 in the chamber. You might have a down one that just either on a periscope or one sticking out.
Yeah, that's planned.
Yeah. So having a couple different way, having a rocket that is a camera, like lots of camera systems built into it, would be pretty fascinating. And then what happens is as we look at the OH space thing continuing to grow forward, it could be one of those things that we learn a bunch of things from it, and then the next rocket we solidify around things that make sense. Go ahead, Courtney.
Have you thought of putting a small little cage in there with a mousetronaut?
He won't survive.
Mouse to the moon, Duchy of Grand Fenwick. Wouldn't survive. Too many G-forces, huh? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I won't talk about why I know that. Anyway, next question.
Michael Anderson from Jackson, Wyoming. For Blackmagic Design Hyperdecks, how many times should I expect to plug and unplug my SSD SATA-III drives before the SSD connection pin issues or failures with the drives? Or what are the best practices for replacement of the SSD drives?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, for replacement, you just buy new ones. Whatever's available. They use 2.5-inch SSDs, except for the Hyperdeck Mini, which uses SD cards only. But the regular Hyperdecks use just 2.5-inch form factor SSDs. And they have an edge type connector with the gold, fingers, which is a self-cleaning type connector, unlike pins, which if you get them in crooked, they might bend the pins or something. But the edge type connectors, when you insert them and remove them, they kind of clean themselves because they have a wiping action. Every now and then, if you get dust in them, you might want to clean them out with some contact cleaner. And you could clean them on the drive itself because it's easily accessible. And if you get a long, one of those cleaners with the long snoot on it, the little, spout that extends out, you can clean the ones inside the drive itself. But other than that, they're good for several thousand insertions and removals, and I don't think you're going to be taking them in and taking them out that many times before they're dead.
Most SSDs are actually, they may be good for several thousand insertions. They're certified for 150. So that's just the thing to know, is that they only guarantee 150, and we've definitely had them fail. I don't know what the exact number was, but they stop reading or they stop reading well, with too many, I have stacks and stacks of SSDs because when we're doing stuff where we're the only record, we buy new ones, like you would buy tapes. And so we buy exactly the size we need. We put them in. Oftentimes we deliver those to the client as well. We copy them and then deliver them. But so we rarely, for ones where we're the primary record, we rarely use ones more than 4 times. And then after that, they go into the library and they get used for all the tests and all the other stuff. And that's why I have stacks and stacks of them because we just budget it about a quarter of the cost of it because that's about the same as a tape. And depending on what kind of tape you used, but it's about a tape. And so that's how the math worked out. And in the budgets that we have, it's just a line item that says, recording media, and it's not very high and it covers it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and if you use the R5 contact cleaner, it has a lubricant in there, which prevents them from wearing out quite as easily.
Yeah. Next question.
Craig Kadoki from Toronto, Canada. Has anyone used the Monoprice Blackbird 4K Series 7.1 HDMI Audio Extractor? Here's a link for it. I'm curious if it would be enough to use at my deck for office hours surround 5.1.
It should be. We're going to be delivering it as separate tracks. So there's no Atmos. There's no, theoretically, this should be able to pull the tracks that are coming out of it. The only question I have is I don't know how YouTube will deliver the 5.1, whether it's in some kind of package or whether it's in raw tracks. So we will be delivering it to YouTube as 6 discrete tracks, and I'm not sure whether it'll work. So, what I would say, Craig, is I don't know. And if you get it and it doesn't work with YouTube, we'll work on figuring out why and how, and we can put up another version of it just for you. That's just HLS with 6 channels and have you test it. You'd be testing something that is really designed more for office hours 2.5. Hopefully you'll invest in it. And if you feel like it, and then we'll test it. Doesn't look like it's a huge commitment financially. So hopefully you'll test it and we'll find out if it works. Next question.
Next question is Alex Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. I own 8 of the ADJ Mega Bar RGBA lights running in DMX mode. If I use colors other than pure white, I get minor flickering in the camera. Not all colors create flickering. Running the max brightness always. I'm shooting at 5994, 125 SS on a Lumix FZ300.
Yeah, you're going to find some of those LEDs are still running. They're running at a lower rate than the white, and they're running, and that's just because that's how they're producing those colors, and it may not. You may have it set to max, but it's max, but they're still obviously at a lower rate than 5994, and so that's why you're seeing the flickering. If you lower the frame rate, you'll probably be able to figure out lower the shutter speed. You'll figure out where that cutoff is as far as what they're doing. Generally, you're not going to be able to find a lighting fixture that's a couple $100 that is going to be able to produce the kind of light you need for a camera. That's been our experience. They're great for what they're used for, but not usually capable of doing having a cycle speed that's high enough. It requires more expensive chips. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And it's RGB. I think wouldn't it be RGBW if you wanted a true white light? Because a true white light, the RGB emulates the white, but I'm not sure what the A stands for.
I'm not sure, but I don't think the problem right now is that RGB, whether it's pure white or not. It's just that it's flickering, and so I think that because I haven't used these ones specifically, I just looked at them before the show because the question was put in early. So I would, but you're going to need to probably have a higher quality or a more expensive light fixture that's going to be able to cycle at a higher rate. Next question.
Next question in from David Brady in New York, New York. Looking for options. Our internal delivery platform is currently Workplace by Meta. So the social features are needed, as well as the usual corporate links, SSO, SAML, integration, etc. Are there any other players in this space that are turnkey?
You might want to reach out to me, David. We haven't done it for years, but we used to be, and I don't know whether we can get the certifications turned back on again, but we used to be certified. The sister app to Makana, called Commenda, was used to be certified for Workplace, and so we used to do very large events where we basically grabbed all the questions and comments from Facebook and Workplace and put them into something you can actually manage. So anyway, so if you reach out to me, we'll kick around a little bit. If that's really a pain point, reach out to me in Discord and we'll talk about it. But we haven't used it for a couple of years, so we might have to dust off some certifications and see what we can do there. Next question.
From me. The question is, local venue has ramped up to provide a large rehearsal space here in Wilmington, Delaware. Is this kind of multi-use facility the wave of the future?
And as a note for our viewers, we're cutting through these questions pretty quickly. We're going to start slowing down and just really chewing on these questions if we don't get more. So it's up to you. We can. But if you have questions, this is a great morning to ask. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, there's always been a desire for multi-use space, especially in the convention hall or that kind of venue, because, they set up banquets or they set up live meetings, they set up a lot of interactive stuff. So there's always that. As far as office space goes, there's a trend these days to the open office, which they just decided to go to this trend at the wrong time, just when a giant pandemic hit the world. And I find that a lot of people really don't like that. I have a friend who works at Warner Brothers, and they just have a brand new building designed by Frank Gehry that they're going to be moving into, or have started moving into, and it's all open office space. No one is assigned an office. No one is assigned a desk. No one has a cubicle. There's just open. There's computers and or monitors and keyboards and open seating. And when you go in, you sit down at whatever space is available and you log in and you're there, which seems to me, and everyone seems to hate it. So that's why a lot of people are still working from home. So they have a lot of this giant new office space that is designed without offices or cubicles, open office seating, and nobody really likes it. There's a building near my office that they built on the lot, one of the studio lots here in Hollywood, and they built this huge white elephant of an office building. Here, it's called the Harlow. This is what it looks like. It's been finished for about a year and a half. It's a giant open office like you see there in the corner, and they can't rent it. It's been sitting vacant for about 2 years now. Nobody seems to want it. It's a huge facility. I imagine it's glass walls on 3 sides, so I imagine the air conditioning would cost a fortune to keep it cool. It's a giant greenhouse, so I think they need to think about this open office space stuff. As far as a multi-use convention center, yeah, that's still useful.
I kind of want to do a documentary on the open office, from its concept to, like, because it's kind of an evolution of the cubicle, right? Like we're going to take away your offices and give you a cubicle. And then we're going to just take away the cubicles. Just make you just sit down and ride a desk. And I think that it is probably the most disastrous architectural design process in the last 10 years, maybe 20 years, because it really has evolved over the last 20 years. I've watched it kind of be added to things, and everybody hates it. Like, it's just, all the employees. I don't know any employee. I know managers that like it because it makes the employees feel uncomfortable about surfing anything that they shouldn't be surfing and be doing anything that they shouldn't be doing or whatever. So managers like it. I think that the chief financial officers like it because it's a lot cheaper to pack people in like cattle. And so I think that those folks think it's great, but the actual workers hate it like the plague, and they're constantly looking for opportunities to not be there. And it's just such a huge, just massive mistake, and every time you get a call, even if it's work, you don't want to interrupt everybody else. You don't want to necessarily talk about that in front of 80 people or 20 people or whatever. So you stand up and walk away, and you're constantly standing up and walking away, or everybody's got headphones on. So they've isolated. So anything that they said they were going to get out of open office, you walk into an open office and there's a whole bunch of people with big old over-the-ear headphones that are there. And then as a person on the other side, I work with a lot of corporations with open offices. I look for, if I don't see headphones, I will barely say anything because I have no idea who's in that room. Like, I don't know who I'm, and I'll just be as quick as fat, and people have learned, and they'll ask me, well, you weren't very talkative. I'm like, yeah, because you didn't have headphones in. Like, I'm not going to talk freely with someone who doesn't have headphones in an open office, and so it's a horrible idea. So I think it would be great. It would be great to do a documentary about, like, who thought of this stupid idea and why it got put in there and what were the arguments for it, and then we can figure out who to fire. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually the big facilities, in the major production centers, New York, Chicago, L.A., et cetera. They have a built-in potential user group. But when something this large gets built in a small city like Wilmington, Delaware, we don't have a super active production community. We have lots of boutiques, and they do very well. But this is a very, very large facility.
and to back up what this is designed for, we got a little off the direction of what we're doing here. This is specifically a concert rehearsal space. So the reason it's so big is because you got to put the entire stage, lighting, everything into it for a tour. And it's not, looking at it, it's not as big as Rock Leditz. So Leditz up so it's about 4 hours away from, and I'm sure that this was part of their business model or their business plan, was that 4 hours away is Rock Leditz. Rock Leditz is outside of Lancaster. It's where almost every tour starts. So every tour in the United States goes to these massive stages. You could probably fit 4 of the ones that are in Wilmington into one of these stages. And these are massive stages, and Claire is the company that operates a lot of these. And so anyway, so what they do is this is where they build up a stage, they figure out all their lighting, they program their boards, they figure out the audio, they figure out all the bits and pieces, they build all the kits of how we're going to tour, how we're going to pack it into a truck, how we're going to do all those things. The bands come and rehearse. They rehearse sometimes for weeks, to figure out all the little bits and pieces and how it all works. And they've got that thing dialed all the way in, but that is but they keep on building more of these in Leditz. They keep on building more, because they don't have enough for these tours. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it has to be in the area that it's in, because that's the largest. So that area where Lancaster is, Wilmington's a little over to one side, but still active, is where the largest concentration of population is in the country. Within if you do a 6-hour window around it, it's the largest concentration of population. And so it's, that's where a lot of little tours start, and small, big, all these other things. You have to be kind of in that area to make that work. Anyway, so it's, I think it's a genius thing to do, for them to do that, and to provide people with an opportunity to branch out from, there's really, I don't know of any, I work on a lot of concerts. I don't know of any other place to go other than Lancaster. So this gives people a new option, and maybe outside of the powers that be, so to speak, as far as building your concert. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
They're kind of extending it. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. I was just going to say they're trying to extend it into a rehearsal facility, but also a full-blown video production facility at the same time.
It's good.
Yeah, that makes sense, because when back in the 90s, I was with a venue, and we did a lot of excuse me, not only shows, but also we hosted a couple bands that would spend the week there, and they would do all the rehearsals, not only the rehearsals for just their songs, but also how they would approach the stage. Because you go to Canton, Ohio, you got one stage and it's got these sizes. You go to the next venue, and that's a lot smaller. So you have to figure out the truss, you have to figure out the lighting, you have to figure out even the sound. So if you come into a venue and the sound is just horrible, then the sound guy can go, okay, we need to tweak this and this and this, so we can get the best sound from there. So there is a lot of advantage to doing this. And yeah, for bigger shows, you definitely don't want to come into a venue with your pants down, because a lot of people will be really upset, and they'll be asking for their money back. So this is a great idea, and there's a lot of places that do this too.
Yeah, there's not many that be able to do it at scale. Like, again, Leditz is probably the only one that I know of that does it at full scale, like stadium scale. But yeah, to your point, a lot of folks rehearse in large spaces. Like, for instance, the space that we used for a lot of the concert research that we were doing over the summer and then in the spring, those were all, that's actually been used. There's a heavy metal band out of San Rafael that rehearses in there, or has rehearsed in there to figure their stuff out. But eventually you need a space as big as the spaces that you're going to go into. And that's where things get challenging. Next question.
David Brady, New York, New York. He demoed ExperienceWelcome.com yesterday and got to thinking, are there other players in this space that are worth looking at for cloud-based collaborative production?
I didn't know if it was cloud-based collaborative production as far as, I looked at the website, again, because David put it in early. And I think that there is probably for the back end, maybe. So this seems like a StreamYard kind of thing, or a hop-in kind of solution. That's how that's the box, at least, that I put it in. So there's lots of them. I don't know. There's so many people that kind of ran for that during COVID to try to get the wave. And I think a lot of them are having a lot of financial difficulty right now because there's a lot of people trying to just go back to where they were before, and a lot of folks spent pretty heavily into this, so they're a little leveraged. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael with a question: when syndicated content is distributed to foreign countries, what format is used? Is it just shipping a tape or is it a file?
It depends on. Oh yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, yeah, like Alex was just about to say.
It depends.
It depends on if it's a theatrical feature or whatever, what kind of setup they use. They usually send DCI files, which are on hard drives, which are encrypted and with a decryption key so that the licensing is handled so it doesn't fall into nefarious hands and get bootlegged onto the internet. But these days, it's files, and they're usually encrypted, and DCI is the digital cinema interface format that's used for motion pictures, but I'm not sure how television goes.
And oftentimes, at least they're referred to in the world that I live in as DCPs, which is a digital cinema package. But there's also, I think the DCI and DCP are somewhat interchangeable there. But yeah, and they're really a pain to use. They're like, you got to go in, then there's a key, and the key only lasts for these times and these days, and so on and so forth to be able to run it. So, and usually the projectors that have that know how often it was played, and there's a lot of they make it. They're very careful about really tight control over theatrical releases. Now, for broadcast, that could be sometimes that is just Aspera. Someone just transferring the file, out to make that work. So it's a little bit different for broadcast and for online than it is for theater, really, theatrical releases. Next question.
Elliot, Las Vegas. Firewalls for small companies with no firewall expertise. Just a router, on-premises firewall, managed firewall, or cloud-based firewall. What to do with a remote venue?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I got me a vendor that understands the Ubiquiti line of routers, something like the UDM Pro, and allow them to remote manage your system.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So it really depends on where everything fits. I like to, if the servers are on one site, I'd like to have the firewall right where all of those servers are sitting. And of course, setting up a firewall is really not that difficult. It's its own box, and you want to have that over a router because if there's any point of failure, at least it's not taking down the whole system. And that's the most important part. Plus, you can create what are called honeypots, which are areas that if anybody tries to attack or try to get in, they might be able to go in there and think that they're inside a environment when they're really not.
Yeah, another option that we use is Meraki. It's a little bit more expensive than Ubiquiti, but much easier. In my opinion, easier to manage. So Ubiquiti is great if you have, but Meraki gives you more control through the cloud and more scalability and at a higher price. So anyway, next question.
Got a question for you all. Geek Squad is coming over to calibrate and adjust my new Sony Bravia OLED TV. What else should I have them do while they're here?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Don't give them access to your hard drive or your laptop. Especially if you live in the DC area or Wilmington, Delaware, because I have this theory that there's a lot of spooks that are employed by the Geek Squad just to collect data on people unknowingly.
Wow.
How big is the TV?
65-inch OLED.
Nice. I will say that you definitely want them to turn off everything so it's as flat as it possibly can be. Is the big thing. Go ahead, John.
This is why I miss Home Theater Geeks. Hopefully we'll have him on one day. With one of my favorite shows on Twit Network. They have some great videos where Robert Heron does calibration and he walks through the whole thing with the pro gear. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what would you recommend for cost-effective temperature-controlled storage space for equipment?
So I guess what I'm not certain about is whether you're looking at renting the storage space or what do you need for your own space. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I have, and Alex has actually been there, some vaults that are climate-controlled storage that if you have in your town, it depends on your town. Hollywood, it's easy to find these because there's film storage vaults that are maintain it at a below 50 degrees or around 50 degrees above freezing, and they're kept at a constant humidity and a constant temperature. Most storage units you find out there are not heated or air conditioned, and a lot of them don't even have electricity in them, so you can't even put your own in. Dehumidifiers, anything like that. If you do have electricity, I'd suggest maybe putting in a little Peltier type dehumidifier to pull some of the moisture out of the air, so it'll keep your equipment from rusting or getting corrosion on it. And if you can find a place that's designed for fur storage, there's constant temperature if you're going to put something in storage for a long period of time. That'll keep it from getting overheated and too wet.
Next question.
And it's from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. I'm having a heck of a time installing a new version of Synergy on my M1. The old version won't go to the bin because it's in use. Suggestions?
There's got to be an uninstall somewhere there, for Synergy, to uninstall it and then install the new one. So you need to be able to get the first one off of Synergy completely, and you should be able to find it. Most of these have uninstallers because they're dug so deep into the OS that you need to pull that stuff out first, and it should have an uninstaller on its website or part of the install package. I'd be surprised if it didn't, and otherwise, you may need to use a third-party software that finds all the bits and pieces. I think there's like I want to say desktop cleaner or something like that is something cleaner that will go in and you identify the app and it finds theoretically all the pieces of that app that are connected to it and removes them from the computer. Next question.
And it's from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. Any recommendations for monitoring headphones? Budget is a concern at $100. Need a long cord with a 1/4 or 1/8 inch connector with adapter to 1/4 inch. Used for monitoring audio at hybrid wood-turning club meeting.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Just a general all-around good headphone is the Sony 7506. They work well. They're going to seal your ears so you don't have to hear the high-speed machinery. And they're about $100, maybe a little less, depending on where you get them.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm a big fan when it comes to the $100 mark. Big fan of Shure headphones. The SRH series, I believe, is around $100. I have big ears, so I like the big cups to fit on top of it. And then, of course, I look for 50 millimeter drivers. You're probably not going to find that in $100 headphones, but if you do, let me know.
So I don't know whether in ear or over the ear. For me, especially if I'm at a meeting, I wouldn't want anything over my ears. And so I'm using, and I don't know if I have one of the boxes laying around here because I have a lot of them. I have these, I think they're the Z, let's see, we talk about them, but I want to say CZ10s. These are the Linsoles. we call them the Linsole, and the Z10s, I think are what they're called, but they're about $45. And I have, I don't know, 10 pairs of them laying around here somewhere because I put them I just leave them in the box and we send them out in kits sometimes. So if we need to send somebody something, we just send out a kit with one of these, and they're relatively inexpensive and easy to send out. I've got a couple pairs. This is I have one in my ears, and then I have another one like right here. I don't know why I have two of them here. Some of them I know why, because this one I hooked in my phone. I'm sorry, it's making all this noise because it's tied up with another piece of cable. Anyway, so this one has the what you need, the little mic. The mics are not very good. They're you can make them work, but they're not great. So that means that you'll also have a TRRS out of that one as opposed to a TRS out. I find that they are very sensitive. I mean, I hear a lot. I hear, and I don't know what you would need, especially if you're only buying headphones for less than $100. I don't think you're going to hear more out of something than these Linsole Z10s. They're pretty great in ears if you're willing to put up with in-ear monitors. Next question.
Vic Cities in Lowell, Indiana. What's the best way to get a USB mic into an Atem Mini Pro?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't think there is a good way. You got to go through another computer, I guess, to come into the Atem Mini Pro. And if you go into like a small PC, like one of these quieter 3s have HDMI outs, and you plug your USB microphone into one of the many USB ports on the side. And then you route the output. You go through any of your audio software and then route the output of that over the HDMI to one of the inputs. Or you could take the output over the headphone jack that's also on this little computer into one of the microphone input jacks and set it to line level input on the Atem Mini if you need it in. But if both the Atem and your microphone are going into a single computer, into another computer, and you're not just recording off of the Atem, then I would go into the computer itself and just use the USB mic in the computer and the Atem into the computer and meld them up in your streaming software.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, another thing that you can do is also a lot of the USB. Oh, it's not. Yeah, there's no good way to do it. Sorry, I was going to go down a path and I was like, nope. That's why a lot of the MV7 that we send out as kits, one of the reasons we're investing in the MV7s is because they have an XLR output as well as USB. So I can send it out as a USB mic, but if I need to at some point move them to XLR, I can. Next question.
Courtney Gooden from Hollywood, California. Has anyone seen or used the new Teredek Wave Monitor-Encoder? Looks interesting.
Yeah, so this is a monitor that will receive, I believe, from the Bolt. Is that correct? And then you can view it, but it also has an RTMP stream. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it has. It's a receiver, or is it a transmitter? That's what I'm not. It has HDMI input. It's about $1,200, and it has streaming software built in. It also has a recorder built in. It has it can stream to multiple streaming services at the same time over Wi-Fi. It has bonding for. It has a USB connector, so you can connect a wireless modem from a
wow,
LTE.
That looks really interesting.
And so you can output multiple ways, and it does bonding as well between the streams. And it has Ethernet as well, gigabit Ethernet connection on it, all for around $1,200. So seems like and a built-in monitor with 1,000 nits of brightness, so you can use it outdoors. So it looks like a good accessory for the outdoor shooter that has to stream directly to the internet from this little monitor itself over the cellular network.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I have to check it out. Hopefully, someone will buy one. I'll call. I'll see if I can get a testing. I know, not me. That buying mics for $100 here and there is one thing. Buying like $1,100 things that I don't know, I don't have a project for. It's harder. So, but we'll take a look at that. Next question.
I have a question. Interested in the president's new briefing room setup for virtual meetings. I wonder how this is set up for camera positions.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I've seen this room a few times where the president is sitting in a large room with 3 main monitors in front of him, and they roll around desks so that he can be, he can either be a person on camera or a person behind the Zoom meeting. I think he's doing it now for isolation purposes. But we took the picture. If we could put it up, we could show you what the room looks like. And talked about it at length last night on After Hours, trying to figure out where the cameras are placed in this. We're thinking maybe one behind the left flag. You can, if you look closely, you can see somebody's foot, maybe the bottom of a stick there on the other side. But when one of those people sitting in the chairs are talking, how are we getting their pictures so we can, reverse angle it back to the president, because he's sitting there on the main monitor, obviously, and there's Yellen, I guess it is, sitting there. And I've seen the president also interviewing heads of state and different people the same way. So it's an interesting setup. It looks interesting, but I don't think it really works really well for camera positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I guess what I would say is that I applaud them attempting to move forward into the future, of being able to have a virtual space that they can talk to there. I think that as you look at the wide shot, or you look at the shot there with all the folks, just a little preparation before the show would get everybody's head in the right place. like it's even in the studio where they have Yellen, she is horribly framed, so it's and these things. I know that I sound like I'm picking at things, but here's the deal. When you're framed low to the viewer, subconsciously, you are small. So you are a small person, and and what you say matters less. Like it is, this is stuff that we talk about all the time. And the reason that the framing is so important is to make sure that you're framed well, to make sure you're head and shoulders, to make sure that you're not too wide, to make sure that you're well lit, to make sure that you have good audio, is all about projecting authority, and they're undermining that in this system. I think that it's theoretically, they're trying to build something for TV so that you can have the wide shot and everything else. I don't think anyone cares. We watch the news all the time with insert studios. Like, we don't need a wide shot. Like, we're not, that's not a necessary thing, given that everybody else all over the CNN and Fox and MSNBC and everybody else has everybody in a box because that works the best for the show. And so now you can just place them wherever you need them. You don't have some weird framing. It feels, when you see the one-ups of each person, it feels very contrived, and it just feels like everybody's working too hard. In addition to that, you've got a bunch of hard surfaces. It sounds open. I've heard some of the stuff here. Sounds very roomy. So you got labs inside of a hard room. You have these, contrived one-ups. You have this wide shot that doesn't really work. You have, again, framing that, if you're in a studio, like, it's one thing for pundits, not pundits, but political figures, to have bad audio and bad video because they're technological children. They barely understand how any of this works. And so it's very and I say that from a lot of experience. They're not really able to process this. So they don't understand what any of this means. And so them being at home and not being framed well and sounding bad and being bad lit, that's kind of, that's table stakes, right? So, but once you're in the studio, once those people are sitting there on the floor, you should frame them well. Like, that's all I'm saying. Like she's sitting there, you could have tilted down, so anyway, and I think that they didn't do that. My guess is, looking at that one up, is they didn't do it because there's a White House logo there above her that they're trying to hold if you go to the thing of Yellen, there's a White House logo and she is a bit shorter. There's a White House logo there that I'm sure they're trying to keep in frame, because otherwise all they'd have is wood grain. And so to not do that, and this is a fatal error of production, is to allow your background or your environment to drive your framing. You frame the person for exactly the way that they should look the best. And if you didn't get the background right, let it go. Don't try to frame the podium in front with the logo. Don't try to frame the weird logo in the background. And this team falls into that often. Go ahead, Courtney.
Actually, I think they did a pretty good job, considering that they have to function as a set and have individual close-ups of the people sitting at the desks, and have something for the people sitting at the desk to see the other remote members on. Now, the remote members could be framed better, that's for sure, but they... I think they've hidden the cameras well. The other solution is, like you see on the morning shows, where they have a round table and they have people in the round and they have to get close-ups of each one of them. The cameras end up in the shots. And when you have a monitor you have a teleprompter and a monitor and a clock mounted on the camera, even if they're robotic cameras, that's going to get in somebody's shot and it's going to be distracting. And this wide shot, as you can see, you don't see the cameras. They're hidden tactfully behind the flags, as was mentioned earlier by Mitch, I think. There's a camera just to the left behind the flag on the left to shoot the woman on the right, and one behind the flag on the right to shoot the man on the left. And then the other moderator that's sitting back a bit, his camera is just to the right over the shoulder, back over the shoulder of Janet Yellen there, yes. Shooting across her on a long lens to get him. And so I think, they could have framed it better. Maybe it was a lock-off because of COVID. They didn't want to put too many people in the studio. And it should have been a PTZ of some sort so that they could tilt down. Or maybe, like Alex said, they just wanted to include the White House logo in the top, and she's just too short. I think gotten her a higher chair.
If you look at the frame that it says the White House, like they're definitely wanting to show that they were at the White House.
They should have gotten her a higher chair,
or just pan down and let it go. Like she looks so bad there, and again, there's no reason to have them there. Like just give them booths. They could have easily seen everything. Now she's looking straight into the camera. She's not looking over to one side. You're able to look, there's no reason that you could have all the returns coming right back to a monitor right in front of them. There's no reason for them to be in that wide shot. There's no reason for them to all be in the same room.
Then you don't have them all in the same room because you want to show them in the same room so that they can interact with each other to show you it's
and then that's even worse. Like it's even worse to have them interact with each other because again, it creates all these weird camera shots. What I will argue that, again, what we get to watch on TV every day is people in an insert studio talking to each other. And we don't see them in the same room. Like we don't see them ever in the same room.
I know. And I think people are sick of that, and that's why they went this way.
I don't think so. I think it's a horrible idea. This will last for this administration, and then it'll be gone when it's done. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think they should have just kept the main screen there with the president and the other panelists talking. It would have been a very familiar sight for most people that have used Zoom or any other collaborative software. The other thing that was interesting is listening to the YouTube video, Mickey said that the audio was very screwed up. I'm lightening up a little bit, but there was like a doubling of the audio being played. It's just really an embarrassing thing to make it try to look like a video of a video of a video, and it's just it's failing that way.
Yeah, so you have this weird hybrid thing going on where they can kind of hear each other, but they're bleeding into each other's mics, then they've got open speakers. They've got all the this is literally the worst version of hybrid that you could build. Like it is, other than putting up, and they've done this in the past. They put people in there. So you put 10 more people in there, just sitting there watching. It is literally the worst design of a online thing that I've ever seen. And again, when you look at these kinds of things matter. The reason I'm hammering on this is you have a president who has a historically low approval rating, and this doesn't help. It doesn't help when you have people that are bad framed with bad audio. That doesn't give it. Now, people aren't saying, well, they screwed that up so that they must not be able to run the country. That's not the issue. But they don't have authority. It doesn't feel big. It's not cinematic. It's not, and you could make these folks look great if you put them into their own little spaces and did it exactly the way we do it with the broadcast. Broadcast doesn't even do it very well. But if you do it the way we do it, you could make them look great, sound great, with great graphics, talking to each other. And that would be far less expensive and far more effective than anything else. Let's go ahead and move on. So we got a couple more questions before we're going to get to the top of the hour. Go ahead.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas. Any more thoughts on the Insta360 ONE X2 360-degree waterproof action camera, 5.7K 360, stabilization, touchscreen, AI editing, live streaming, webcam, voice control, especially some of the features?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, you're talking the X2 and not the RS. RS is the one that's that full sensor frame. I have the X1. That's the one I just showed earlier, and I've been meaning to get the X2 because it's got a lot of great features. I really like it over the Theta simply because two reasons. One is it's got an interchangeable battery. I can pop out the old one, put in a new one for more continuous recording, and it's also a lot of the Thetas have internal storage. I think there's the Z1 has SD card that you got to put in there, so I like that. Plus, you have the microphone adapter that you can put into it, so you can get better audio on it. Now I've used this. We've been doing a lot of kayaking this summer with the X1, the first generation X1, and that has been giving me some great shots, audio, video, and photo. So I think it's a great investment to try, but it really depends on what you're going to be using it for.
And last question for the first hour.
Todd Raines from Allen, Texas. Thoughts on the use of a parabolic mic for hybrid wood-turning club meeting for audience questions? It is tough to train members to use the handheld pass-around mic.
Real quick, Mitchell.
Yeah, boom, bad idea. Parabolic, not so good. Just try 2 microphones. Keep them on either side of the room.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, put a mic on a stand and tell everyone if they have a question to approach the microphone and speak into it. And that way they don't have to hand hold it. They come up in front of it. You can get a shot of them. You don't have to worry about where they are in the audience. And you'll get them really close to the mic so you won't have any feedback, which is what you're going to get if you use that parabolic mic and there's any kind of sound reinforcement in the room.
Yeah, the sound reinforcements at the stage and the audience is in the room, you might be okay, but otherwise you're absolutely right. But now if you're doing it for the stream and you barely push it in, you don't need to hear it in the room, then you also will be okay. Sound Shark is the parabolic that they've been on our show, so you can go back and look for Sound Shark. And they have a great set of solutions from small that are like $300 up to big for sports and Fox Sports and the Olympics and so on and so forth. So take a look at those. I think it'd be actually kind of interesting to do it that way. But you would have to have, the speaker thing is going to be the biggest problem that you may have in that area. All right. We are changing subjects. And for those folks who are on that I pushed some questions back. You can bring them in tomorrow, but we pushed them back. They're only in your notes. We didn't delete them. So anyway, hopefully you'll bring those up on Saturday. Now we're going to jump into our second hour, and we're really excited. So Jonas Dottel said, "Hey, I see this thing that's really great. I think we should cover this." And so we went ahead and invited Frank Hund from MakePro X here to talk about these just amazing interfaces that MakePro X are making for audio and other things. And so Frank, it's good. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Where are you coming in from?
From the suburbs of Cologne. So
Excellent.
It's a lot of greenery around Cologne, not so much in Cologne, and it's hot days these days. You don't want to be in the city. You do appreciate when you can sit in your garden and have at least a bit of a breeze. We don't have ACs in Germany. We don't usually need them.
Right.
So we need warm clothes and umbrellas and that stuff.
Right.
ACs are not so usual. But so today I appreciate you take me for my garden.
That's great. That's great. Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with MakePro X?
Yeah, sure. I'm in the media business or on the tech side, technology, so building products, actually since the early 90s, and mostly on the audio ends. Production software, reconfigurable DSP cores for audio stuff and the like. And maybe 20 years back, networking really took off, but people were not so sure what to do with it yet. It's just like the first internet, the second internet, right? And I mean, YouTube came so late, right? Facebook came like second phase only. And same with networking. It took a while to develop. And I spent a long time to consider and to watch what's going on in networks as like, okay, where could I contribute? I was for many years where we were doing, me and my team, we're doing mostly audio DSP, processing, mixing, doing hardware for mixing cores and IOs and that kind of stuff. But more and more it became obvious that networking was great, but there were some holes, some gaps to be closed, because things in the network is nice, and it's easy to connect something to a network these days, right? So you have a Cat5 and click, it's on the network. But then you need to use it, right? You need to be able to plug more than one thing, but to plug a lot of things and to use them right, such that you need network control. And there was actually very little on the controller ends, on the like tactile control or anyway user interface for networks. And for a number of years, we were toying with ideas on how to make this a totally modular experience, because networks are modular. And so we were convinced that the control system of the future also has to be equally modular, such that it is as flexible as networks are. Because in networks, you have, I mean, every workflow potentially is different, right? Because you don't want to adopt to whatever some product designer decided maybe a decade ago how you should do it,
right?
But you want to evolve, right? And the same thing should be possible with your control gear. It should be able to be modified, right? And so if you make a decision today, fine, but maybe your needs change, and maybe you want to scale, maybe you want to scale up, scale down, maybe you want to change, and Also, we wanted to be agile. We wanted to be able to ask you for your favorite interface, have you draw this, and us respond overnight, literally, as in custom controllers. We said like, hey, networks can be built custom, so our controllers also have to be able to be built custom in like no time. To make
and of course, the hard part is for trying to figure out the modularity of that. Like, how do they all fit together? How do they all snap together? How do they all talk to each other?
Right, exactly. I would be embarrassed to show you our first 2 generations.
Right.
So what you see today is.
And when did you start working on these? The first 2 generations. What were the
14? Round about 14.
2014,
2015.
Right. Yeah.
And the generation we have today was formed in like 19 roundabouts. In 19, we had the first circuit boards and form factor in place, like it is now.
Right.
And ever since, we are working with a few pilots, right? And this went on for like over 2 years.
Right.
And so in between, we had to redesign everything because of the chip crisis in the market, electronics. I mean, whoever is in the electronics.
What kind of chips were you having trouble with? Like, what were the real pain points there?
STM32, ST Microelectronics, STM32 processors.
And why were those? Why were those so hard to find?
They have disappeared. They have completely disappeared from the markets. It was a very commonplace processor family and was very popular.
Right.
And it just disappeared. STM doesn't even. I mean, it's very. I mean, you don't even know what's coming. All you know is it has disappeared. So us, just like many companies in the industry, had to basically redesign all boards. Yeah. So the past 9 months, almost 12 months now, all we've been doing instead of developing new things was to change the old such that our stock reducing from the processors which are not available anymore can be switched over to a new family which is available and which we managed to buy in insane quantities. Like we're stocked we are stocked like 4 years now with processors which were available. And so it's not so easy these days. Also, we had to evolve the software end, so it took us a lot of time to make sure that the things we do are as good as it was possible to us. And we're happy to show you some things today. And then
let's see what you have. Let's see what the hardware looks like. Can you show us a couple pictures?
All right. I would like to start with a bit of conceptual setting. What this is about. Maybe. It's, likely all of you know exactly what I'm talking about here. So I will go really fast just a few slides. All right. So, MakePro X, the X stands for whatever it is, what you want to control. So, X is what you do, is your workflow, is what you may invent and put into that place. So we adapt to you. It's not like we ask you to adapt to our products, but the other way around. That's the idea. And it is next generation control. So what is next generation control? What is this? Right? You may say that, but what do you mean? So looking back, what is the status quo today? Now you have MIDI controllers, right? You have maybe special MIDI controllers like Mackie controllers, special like MIDI protocol flavor. You have proprietary controllers which typically control one product, and you have flexible controllers today, which are not as flexible as we would like to see it. But there are a number of somewhat flexible controllers, but still they are more or less static and or difficult. And you will see what is the difference. Last generation control is historic, that people in a production are operating a single product. If you look into like a broadcasting control room today, still many times you have one guy per machine. Yeah, one guy is operating the video switcher, and that's all he does. The other guy is controlling the UI of the playout system or CG system. One guy is there for replay. Another guy is doing the sound. And so you very traditionally have the one man, one machine setup. I mean, many places. And so you may have remote control for this, like a panel for a certain thing, but still, usually it is one panel, one target, right? Which is very much the case in media and stuff. And so no secrets, this is where it goes, right? Next generation control We speak to people who have all been thinking this through, and they all came out, and we all come out at this point that really next generation control separates the operation completely from the services which perform those things, right? I mean, no news to you, right? I mean, this is how you know these problems very well, and this is exactly how you work.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we have to introduce people to these ideas. I don't think I have to introduce you to.
No, we all understand it. Absolutely.
Sorry, Alex?
Yeah, we all understand it. Yeah, this is definitely a regular problem for us.
All right. So it was our targets to allow operators to control not just one machine, but a selection of functions across the gear. And workflow is very central, right? Workflow is different from control. So far, control was control. In the future, workflow is much more important, because unless you have a good workflow, it is very hard to operate these things, specifically when budgets or time or space or whatnot is limited, right? Okay, so this is what we want to achieve, and you may please measure us on whether we are here to achieve this. And it was very clear that perfect workflows require modular hardware. So we need to be able to build user front ends.
So you really have to figure out, like, everything has to be a certain height. Everything has to be a certain distance from each other. I really think that's interesting, keeping, the faders and everything else. All those things have to be thought out, so that, because in every component, it all has to be the same. Otherwise, it'll look like it's kind of cobbled together, right?
Right. And the end results, once you've built it, must be completely professional. It must be extremely solid. It must be serviceable. It must be changed. I mean, you must be able to modify it. And so we decided to just have one screwdriver standard. For example, if you have an Apple product, you need 5 different outlandish tools to open the thing. And now all you need is a Phillips type small screwdriver and determination, and you can take this apart. You can put it together again in a different way, possibly. Now, this is how it looks like. This is maybe the smallest it gets. Like, this is the shortest rail we have. We count in rows, so this is a 4-row configuration here. So we have
so each row is when you count those rows, they're always going to be the same height of those rows, and so you just need to know how to mix and match those rows. Interesting.
That's right. Yeah. So turning this around, you see how this goes, right? It's modules which you can just slide out. You would open the rear. You could
so everything's modular. So it's literally like you have a bunch of things on the front. You could also change the electronics in the back.
Absolutely. So within 3 minutes, I've changed the sequence if I wanted to, right? I could say, like, oh, I need more encoders, maybe 1 button row, 2 encoder rows, right? Maybe I don't need the display, right? So this is, so you can do it, obviously.
So within, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So within that, the pots at the top, the controllers at the top, you could take out the screens and put another one you could swap those out and put another one below it?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Right. You just open the faceplate on the rear, you unscrew it, 4 screws, and so then it slides out. It's like a rail system, like you may see here. Right. You have these grooves.
So it's kind of like in the world of modular, modular synths. It's a little bit like that, but for controllers.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And so it's our third try. It's the golden one. It's the good one. But we had learned, and we have been building a lot of junk to understand. Like, no, it's not it, and discussed with people, and to come out here. It was kind of a crazy venture, because that's not what you're doing when you were just building a product.
Right.
We were a B2B company for many years. We've been doing projects for other companies, tech developments, right? And this was around.
So when you say this is the third version, you weren't really selling the other versions. You were doing what was paying the bills was tech for other folks.
Right. And but the first 2 generations of this, which I'm too embarrassed to show, we did them for ourselves just to learn. We built them and it was done, and we scrapped it.
Right. You can't release this. Yeah.
It's just the third. This is the third one, and so we didn't take this lightly. It wasn't like a quick thing, but we were on this for years to make it, to really make it work.
Yeah.
And just here on the slide, you see the concept. It's segments like 1, 2, 3, 4, up to any number of segments you like, because you have silver rails and black rails. Here you see black rails. They connect segments. Right. While keeping the pitch, it's kind of important, right? So if you have a certain pitch on your channels, and these rails keep it, So you can keep building sideways.
That's great.
You can also put 2 units besides each other, which are like silver rails, so they're like separate units, and still they keep the pitch, right? So in order to keep the pitch, you can build a large device with many segments, or you can use multiple small devices and just put them next to each other, and still the experience is exactly the same thing.
Right.
And also on the software side, as we will see, the experience is exactly the same thing, because Glue, which is our software, which we'll see in a moment, it is multi-control device. It just takes as many as it finds, and it puts them in a sequence. And so you can build larger setups out of smaller devices, which is very, very practical. If today in mixing, let's say mixing, that's where we come from, studio and audio and live. But in mixing, rental companies today have large scale mixers, right? Why? Because for the big gigs, for the largest gigs, they need big mixers, right? But then they also have many small mixers for all these small things, right?
Right.
And now our idea, and actually we discussed with them, and also they have the same idea. They say ideal would be a system whereas we have always the same components, whereas we take 1 or 2 for small and we take 5 or 6 for big, of the same, right? So we have a pool of devices which we can mix and match and scale to the event of the day. Right. So
well, and what's interesting is, like, for one of the things that we've done a lot of is when we do like a multi-room, we might have 6 or 8 rooms that we're doing. We'll have all of those via Dante come back to it like a CL5, like a Yamaha CL5. And then we'll have little the X touches that Behringer makes, and each one of them has their own room, and we've given them different parts of the CL5 to run. And so we have a whole bunch of people doing audio for, like, let's say 8 different rooms, and one master audio A1 who's basically overseeing all of that and can make any corrections. But the reality is, what you have would be way more efficient for us, because the X Touch has a lot of things we don't need. This gets back to your point. It was built for, how do I solve all the problems that might happen with this board, rather than how do we solve the problem for this show?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's you could possibly work with one controller which wasn't made for your task, but the moment you start to pile up a table with 4, 5, 6 controllers, which were all not made for exactly the workflow, then you have a lot of irritation, right? You have knobs which have no function. You have semi-usable layouts for it, and a lot of it. And this is not simple. It's not easy. It's not. I mean, if you're not there this day, then your substitute, your volunteer, whatever, right? Maybe not. You find out. You don't want to find out, right? So you want to keep it simple.
Absolutely.
A number of rows, number of segments. It's all flexible. So therefore, it is. You've seen the very smallest. Like we have this like row concept. 4 is the absolute smallest. But you can also build this like really large. There's really no limit. This exceeds. You see here, bottom right is the largest control device so far we've been building. Why? Because there was the need for it. It's a 56-channel console, and anything in between. And that was always the purpose, make this like fully scalable.
And what mixer is that console working with? Is it going to Pro Tools? Is it going to a specific hardware mixer?
Yeah, it is multi-targets, right?
Oh, wow.
In a studio, you want to control not just one thing. You want to control a number of things, and it may be a Pro Tools, right? So there's HUI protocol talking to a Pro Tools. At the same time, you may be using a Logic, right? So, I mean, people actually use multiples, not only always one sequencer, right? They have different projects, different setups. So you want a controller which supports all of them. Also, like in studio or in production, You may have other gear, like for monitoring. You need some zero latency processor because you're feeding back to the ears, right? So, right. For example, RME has total mix. It's like a DSP function within their interfaces. We control total mix. So right. It would be very normal to say, all right, one of my layers, like what I assign to my surface, one of them is for monitoring, and now I'm controlling total mix, not Pro Tools, but total mix or any other DSP core for that matter. Right. We're also working with a company which is doing superb, really nicely done software course, like native audio right. mixer course, right? So then you don't, really, this is the way it's going, right? You will, in a few years from now, will you still be using a traditional mixer? I guess not, because traditional mixer is UI and DSP inside, I/O in the back. You need it network distributed. And for the engine,
a lot of us have talked about this. There is a process of people talking about the fact that the old way that mixers are built is something that we're still kind of held back by a lot of the engineers who use them, who want them to be the way they understand them. But we're like, I just want a nodal interface. I want to have a bunch of inputs that just say, I have controllers coming in, and I'm going to attach this controller to this function. And I don't care about all I don't care about just all the DCAs or the mix buses or whatever. I just want a nodal thing that I can control. I can design a flow, and I can have inputs, and I can have them control and attenuate what I want them to attenuate at a level that I want them to attenuate. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. There's a lot of traditional thinking in, well, maybe in every segment, but in audio, right? Yeah. You have people who are
every segment of the entertainment industry. Everyone wants what they know. They get paid to get it done. So they don't get paid to figure it, to take risks.
But so far the proposition has been moving to the cloud, moving to networks, right. was like surrender your faders.
Right. So how do these get connected to those? This is what you call glue. This is how you connect this hardware to the software?
Right. Yeah. Let's look at glue. Glue is the name is, the name says it all, right? It connects everything in the network as like a control layer. It does not seek to be the one and only, but it can actually happily interface with other control systems.
Right.
You can use glue for multiple purposes, but in a typical streaming setup, I think glue would be like the central thing. Because it is multi-targets, like multiple target devices, any number of you can.
So, and when you say multi-target, could you have a slider affecting multiple things at the same time?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, yes. So you can just sit there and tie these together with other things. And so this is a software configuration. It sees what you've built, what you put together. It sees everything on the network, right?
Right. That's right.
And then you're able to define so nothing means anything until you say it means something.
That's true. Yeah. So the control devices, glue is multi-device, so it'll take any number of our controllers, but it also takes other controllers. Glue already now natively supports the Stream Deck. So if you're into some more buttons and you want them video labeled, you plug a Stream Deck into glue and you have more buttons. We will be soon supporting MIDI controllers as well. Right? Because people should be able to use whatever they have. If it makes sense, then it makes sense, and they should be able to do this. So this sheet here only shows our devices, but it's you can connect more MIDI controls, Stream Decks, that kind of stuff.
And what's the protocol that the other devices need to have for you to use it with glue?
Actually, there isn't much, right? So, there's MIDI. Yeah. Then there is like special MIDI, like Mackie Control or something. Yeah. We will also be supporting Mackie controllers. We will be like an MCU host, for that matter, such that we can use the displays like the X-Touch, right? You will be able to use the X-Touch with glue.
Interesting.
So why? There are so many X-Touches out there, right? Yeah. Which many of them just sit on the side because it's of limited use. Yeah, it's
it is. And then there's also I think the Behringer, and I can never remember the exact one, the BSC 2000 or whatever. It's like a MIDI, those MIDI controllers, which we had lots of for a long time, where we could just
right.
lots of things that we could do. But theoretically, that could talk to glue.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We will be supporting MIDI controllers as well. On looking at our own hardware, Glue can treat a number of devices, and all you see here is an example. Can treat them like one. Yeah, so you don't have to have big desks, but you can have multiple small desks, which you combine in agile ways, right?
And you can recombine them. So what's really interesting here is that it's not just that you can build a cool thing that's modular, but if your needs change, you can disassemble this and build it into something else down the road, right? You're not committing to something.
That is right. Yes. It's Glue. There has to be one instance of Glue somewhere in the network. Glue is headless, so you can run a browser, look at Glue. Glue can also start its own UI, but typically you would say no. Glue runs in a server blade, maybe, or it runs on your laptop, and you use another laptop to configure it. So configuration and the core of Glue don't have to be in the same place.
Right.
Glue can even run within our devices on a so-called CPU tile. If we hadn't been so busy redesigning absolutely everything the past year, then the CPU tile would long be shipping. But later this year, we'll be shipping this CPU tile, which is like a high-level fast computer, if you like. It's Linux.
And in that CPU tile, you can program the entire panel without a computer.
That's right. Yes, that's right. You just browse to the device, which runs Glue on its CPU tile. You configure it, and then this device speaks the target protocols. Right, because the Glue is internal. Glue speaks all these languages, all these protocols, and so you would be having a device put on the table, switch it on, and the moment CPU has booted, computer has come up. We will also be having screens, like bigger screens, not just OLEDs, but bigger screens, touch screens within the devices. Also, later this year, we will demonstrate. And then you can have perfectly autonomous, perfectly individualized. That's the point, right? You can literally build your own device doing exactly what you would like to be doing in a product format. And that was always our purpose. That was always what we wanted to achieve. Years back, we said things like, you build product, we help you. There are interviews you may find with me saying such things years back. But of course, we were not able to demonstrate this yet. But now we are, and we're really serious. This is this end of the day. You design a product which is perfectly professional. It's not like rigged or something, but it is really solid. It is really the thing you want to be using, and it is completely custom. Tiny excursion. I'm sharing another screen briefly to show you the custom builder, because this is also something which has not easily been seen yet. Right. So I think you see my browser now. And this is a website. There is not much on our website. We apologize. We have to be careful at the moment, because with the tiny bit we're giving out, we're getting a lot of response, and we would be completely overwhelmed if we were just, to give out everything to everyone. It's just not possible. We will have to go step by step, disclosing things. Important is that we not only have standard devices like this one, which is like a product. It has a name, it has a price, you can buy it at a dealer, right? But you can also build your own. And this is what my device is for. All you see now, a dog just came home. So hello, Debbie. You can do the same thing. After this call, you can log on to MakeProX.com, MakePro-X.com. You register. You can register with your Google account. That's the quickest. And then you go to My Devices. You create a new device, and you are in a builder application. Whereas you can, let me just create a little space. And now you can move things around, which you take from a library of what we call tiles.
Right.
So you drag and drop a thing in here.
Right.
There is a button called Interactive 3D Viewer, which opens in a different tab.
That's great. So you're actually able to really visualize what it's going to look like.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah. And if you had this on a second screen,
I'm going to ask you as a Mac user, can I export this out as an USDZ so I can look at it on my desk? That's the next step. Now that you have the 3D model, we want to be able
browser, right? You can at least you can see it in your browser. You can send this to a friend, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, so your friend can also toy around with it and try. But you see, I'm abusing this unit here, and you see in the 3D, you see right away what I'm doing. And we did this in order to be able to shoot photographs, like you see a photo on the right, which was done using the 3D viewer, and you say add perspective. So Chuck comes a still of this thing, so you can build something.
Send it out to someone and say, this is what it would look like. Yeah.
Right, propose to a customer, right? All the integrators, right? Because building units is not such a common thing today. I mean, there is no such thing as we know that someone has achieved such a thing. So people are not quite prepared to expect this. But the idea is you built it in the browser. You build your device, so you can just scroll down. You can make it wider. You can make it smaller. You can choose like Maple. Oh wow! Okay, this is a crash report. Don't select Maple in this version.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. We're out on the front edge of this is the wonders of demos, and we're out on the front edge of figuring this stuff out. But yeah, it's great.
But it may still be working. Let's see. Maybe I can go back. I guess I can, and go to another. Go to another device. All right. Now this is actually this is.
So you're going to be continuing to make modules. You have a lot of modules already. Are you? I assume you'll continue to be making modules. But people can really design exactly what they want and figure out, and then you just you can just order from here. Is that kind of how this?
That's right. That's the idea. We do more and more modules, and you have more and more options. And so our target is to have this custom device on your table within 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah,
and that's a lot faster than any other way to get a custom thing. All right, so that I wanted.
That's amazing. And this is available on the website right now.
Yes, it is.
And if someone orders from the website right now, it's 2 to 3 weeks. It's active.
Yeah, it is. If you go to deselect perspectives, bring in pricing and availability. Now this is a special device here. It doesn't show any pricing, but if I go back and go to whatever, I go back here. Now, I should restore it to see the right. Now, here's the price. Okay. It does calculate the price. So when you double the fader module, for example, you would see the price going up with the modules. Okay. What we do is not cheap in the sense of what Mr. Behringer does is cheap. But I think it's obvious because cheap was never an objective. We believe there's too much cheap out there. And at the end of the day, cheap is not cheap because cheap means you buy multiple times. And if you have lots of cheap on your table, it's still cheap. It's not getting better by just
and when you're talking about large facilities that are having these installed, this is not the biggest cost when they're putting them together.
That's absolutely right. So we even think to a professional, it is very affordable what we're doing. Right. It's not outlandish. But people who think that Uli Behringer is the Robin Hood of the poor musician, right? They may be shocked by,
Yeah. Again, I think this is something that it just depends on who the market is there. But I think it's a fascinating approach to putting these things together. Let's jump into some of the questions. We've got a bunch of them stacking up.
Right.
So let's go ahead with the first question.
It's from Douglas Carmichael. Can the MakePro X boards be used for live event applications like controlling Wave's eMotion LV1, which accepts Mackie Control and a proprietary MIDIPLUS FIT protocol?
That's right. Yeah. We have implemented the FIT controller, like an emulation for the FIT, which behaves just like the FIT does. It's not yet released, but it is being tested. We just had Serge Gräfe, who is the front of house guy for an German electronics act called Kraftwerk. They're around since the 70s. They're like the icons of electronic music in Germany, Kraftwerk. And they did a tour through the US. And Serge was controlling the LV1 because LV1 is his mix core. Actually, he's using the LV1 for the Kraftwerk tour, and he was using one of our controllers to control LV1. Today, you are kind of limited to MCU off-the-shelf controllers. So now we're talking X-Touch, we're talking Icon controllers and the like. And so Serge was using one of our controllers, I think 24 faders, 32, I don't know, maybe 28 could be like +4. And he was using this on multiple layers. So he was controlling LV1 next to, I think, a direct out Prodigy processor. It's also in his rack, which he was controlling. And then there's the DS100s from DB Audio, like a German PA company, which is like a soundscape processor, very, very nice 3D creating environments, spatial processor. And he's controlling all of that from his glue, from his MakePro desk. And so, yeah, I think I'm meeting Serge soon at a Kraftwerk gig nearby, in Bonn, end of August. I'm meeting him. And
for those listening to it, we now have a pristine pronunciation of what Americans will call Kraftwerks. Like that's the Kraftwerk, not Kraftwerks, but Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
But now we know exactly how it's supposed to be said because they are, obviously the pioneers that have basically cut all the ground in this area long before almost anybody else. They're amazing artists, but just so people.
Great to know that they made it outside Germany.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. We just don't pronounce it correctly. So anyway, but they were heroes as I grew up. I grew up in the rave industrial, scene, and they were heroes in the world that I lived in. Now let's go to the next question.
Fun on the Autobahn. Okay, Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. MakePro X looks amazing. Frank, can you talk about how the custom creation procedure works for build-to-order My Devices service?
And I think we actually covered that. This question was asked, I think, before we kind of wandered through the customization, which is truly amazing. I love the fact that it's exporting or showing you a 3D model. When it exports a USDZ, then it'll be even better. Next question.
Douglas is back with a question. What specific protocols do the boards output? Can they be customized to utilize network protocols like OSC or MIDI-over-Ethernet?
Yes, very, very possible. I'm sharing my screen once more to actually show you Glue and how this works. To answer your question, this is the welcome screen to Glue. This is what you see when you browse to wherever Glue runs. As you see, localhost runs on my laptop right now. And it lets you select a solution, which is a totally custom, like you could call it project or network status or whatever. A solution defines what it does. And you can very quickly switch between solutions. Solutions are made up of features and targets. Now we're coming near your question. So yes, Glue supports, let's look at targets first. Targets are data-defined target devices. Data defines things which you can easily define using custom configurations of standard protocols. So here you see MIDI, OSC, DMX, HTTP, UDP, TCP, you read yourself. So OSC, for example, is a good choice. You create a zone. Zoning is what you put onto the UI, buttons, faders, encoders, etc. So you create a new zone. You edit this, and now you create parameters like this, and it's an OSC protocol. You select what type of a parameter this is. It may be continuous, like 0 to 1, for example, floats, which is very popular in OSC. It could also be literal, like minus 7.2 decibels or so. That is all continuous. Selectors are like a drop-down list, one out of many options. Switch is on-off. And action is a thing without a status. Action is like go, and there's no status other than a return value, but there is no value to an action other than go, and with some response. So OSC-wise, here's an address. It's a data type. This is an address for the value string return and the label return. So the remote guy can send strings back or labels back, which can be displayed on the OLED displays. So the options here are protocol dependent. So if I'm creating another protocol, which like this here is whatever OSC test, and so this here, let's say we make this MIDI test. Now here, let's say MIDI. It is already selected. New zone. Open this parameter. And now for MIDI, it's continuous. You have all your MIDI commands, right? So depending on your protocol of choice, you have different options for this like data entry mask. This is data. This is not code, right? So for standard protocols, many times you can define everything you need by yourself. For example, let's go. Here's the Waves Fit. All right, that's the MIDI protocol for the Waves Fit. Let's look at this Behringer X32. It's kind of interesting because it's a powerful mixer. It's not such a bad mixer at all, and has so many options. And it is a OSC-based thing. And so here you actually see how it is supported in OSC. Yeah, like we could go here and say these are the volume parameters. Now we can index and say like we have 32 of them. So we don't have to click and enter like 32 times. It's indexed. And in the address, for example, this expression here is actually JavaScript. It is a script inline in the address. And what this does is it looks at the index. And if it is smaller than 10, then it adds a trailing 0. Because the X32 expects not 1, but 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 9, then 10, 1, 0. So always 2. And this little script actually takes care of this. So this just demonstrates how productive it is, how easy it is to support complex devices just with some clever expressions and without coding, actually. And so this is already like taking it quite far. Many times you don't need any code here at all. Yeah. You can support your own targets. Another way to do this, which is more advanced, is we go to features, is scripting. Yeah. Glue is totally open for developers, for developments. If you know JavaScript or TypeScript for that matter, TypeScript is the more strictly typed JavaScript, then you can write your own code. You say save and apply, and it works. You don't need to install any other development environment. You don't need to wait for us to release something to the world, but you can script away, you can test it, and you can upload this to the cloud such that your friend could take it the other day and use it. We have some examples here. We're still building on this, but here you can see it's very straightforward for you to code on functionality. If you like, if you can. The good thing is JavaScript is so popular, you always find someone like this language of the internet, right? So you can always find someone who can operate this if in case you have a very, very custom script behavior.
Well, yeah, and it's infinitely, once you have JavaScript, it's infinitely scalable, like or adjustable, so it's very powerful. We got a couple questions coming in, so I may throw another one at you here. Next question.
Mickey Macachor from Manila, Philippines. Do you offer a service to custom etch or laser engrave markings and labels on the hardware?
We're not doing this today. It's an interesting proposition. We have heard this before, and we are not set up to do this yet. But this may be done in the future. But let me comment on that. If you could do it, then literally you could do it, because our devices can be taken apart with just always the same screwdriver, and you could take the metal, engrave it, put it back, put the device back in shape. So one day, I guess we may be able to. I have to say
that sounds, it seems like it would be amazing if in that designer, you could put all the labels that you want across that. Now, the one thing that would take away is the ability to move these things around and use them for something else. But so if you're building a permanent rack or whatever, but it would be cool to just put the little the names underneath everything and all the things you want, and then just it all comes ready to go together.
Yeah. We actually labeling. The buttons have RGBs, right? And the buttons can be labeled with stickers. And so we found a supplier, and we found decent stickers which actually stick to these to our buttons. Right. And so we consider to enable that in the builder. That you could give text to a button, and we would be printing labels, like a set of labels which you could apply your way. So that's the first thing we I guess we will do.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA. Are all of the custom solutions designed to set on a test desktop? Are there any provisions to mount an interface onto a field tripod, or do you recommend using a tray instead and preserving a desktop orientation?
Very good question. We have multiple ways to mount a device. On table is usually the defaults. It can be in table. Yeah, so we have rails which allow you to sink in a controller into like a cutoff in a table. Mm-hmm. That's possible. In rack, it's very important, because 4 segments, like you see on screen, this device is 19-inch rack size.
That's great.
So this was third generation. First 2 didn't have it. Third has it. So
it's such a calculus problem of getting everything to be even, getting all the rows to work, getting it to work in all the different ways that you might use it. It's really fascinating. Right.
And it has to look okay. Yeah. It has to look good. Yeah. If it looks like then no one would want to use it either, right?
Yeah.
So you can use this in racks. You can use this in table and on table. Usually our things are too heavy to have them mounted on a microphone stand or whatnot. You can resort to like how do you call this? I'm not a native speaker. Sometimes I'm really wondering for words. I mean, on stage you have like stands where you can put keyboards and where you can put other gear, and you could just use those with the standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Mickey Control from Manila, Philippines. Does Glue have special hooks developed to control hardware that do not use typical control protocols?
To you, okay. Controller side or target side? Target, yes, totally, right? I mean, we looked at target definitions, which is like data. We looked at the scripting ability. So yes, those are the hooks for supporting targets. We wanted to make this so open that everyone can add his targets. Like you're lacking nothing. You can implement any protocol. You can do all of that side. On the controller end, we will be supporting certain devices. It's not so easy. It's a little more complex because it's a lot more standardized. So we would be curious to know more of your cases. Maybe you could send us an email, community@MakeProAudio or MakePro-X.com. And tell us more how we could help. What would you like to do? Maybe we have a solution.
Good,
if not, then at least we understand your case better.
Absolutely. Courtney, you had something to add to that?
Sorry, I was muted. So the protocol between your user interface and the glue, is that HTTP, standard HTTP, and can the glue be located on an AWS server or a server blade somewhere else on the internet? And then that connected via HTTP over whatever protocol you choose to your targets. Is that how it normally works?
It's the default connection between tiles. We call these modules tiles, right? So between a device and the host running glue, the standard, like the default thing, is a USB connection. Now, this is very practical in studios. This is practical where you have where you are in a rack, possibly where you also have like a CPU playing the brain. In more network setups, like anything broadcasting, right? USBs, no. We've been there, we've done that. And then you would be opting for an Ethernet connection, like an IP. It's not HTTP, it would be TCP, right? So, but still an IP protocol, transports, throttled transports, so packet transfers. And this is not supported by every device. But if we go to the builder again, I guess you still see my screen. You can select from different options here. Actually, we should see that it is three options. Just a sec. All right. There are, for such a device, there would be two: one with Ethernet and one without. Right. So if you want an IP connection, then you go Ethernet, and yes, it goes IP, and glue can be anywhere on that logical network. That's right.
That's great. Next question.
From Andy Carluccio in San Francisco, California, would you be interested in talking about adding a preset for controlling zoom via OSC from this configuration suite?
We would be very interested to hear more on that case and your thoughts and your requirements. The point is that there are so many things which need to be controlled, and our team is not that big. We have to go step by step. So the better we understand things, how to do it, why to do it,
one of the things that this whole show, for instance, that you're looking at here is all run with Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO. So basically all of the things that you see here, when you look at it, when you watch the video later, you won't see this grid. You'll see a produced show, which you might be seeing in one of the windows. All of that is controlled from, basically, we're pulling the ISOs, the isolated video out of Zoom, putting it into a hardware system. And then Zoom OSC is actually, we're using it to control all the bits of, a lot of things in part of Zoom. And getting information from Zoom. And so it seems like it would be for people who are building virtual events and having basically hardware control, it would be almost a perfect match.
Right. Very likely, if it is OSC, you could do this right now. And you wouldn't even need us to do it. Right. You would just be defining an OSC targets and start entering the command set of Zoom. Yeah. So, and if there was any little gap still left, which I don't think there is, we fully support OSC. Then it's not hard to close. Yeah. Very interesting. I didn't know that Zoom was OSC controllable. That's news. So very interesting.
It's very powerful. Next question.
From Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, what is typical of the lead time for custom-created controls? What configuration options might affect delivery? Are there any clues in the configuration that indicate that a module will delay shipment?
Good questions. Those are the same questions we are processing today. We are target, and we have to solve them. Mm-hmm. We are targeting like a 2 to 3 week turnaround. Really, like we target a 10-day to dispatch, and then whatever time it takes to logistics to reach your point in the world. So right. 2 to 3 weeks is what we target. At the moment, we may need a week or two more, just because we have a backlog. At the moment, we have everything which is in the browser we have available, minus the 8x8 matrix tiles, which are like 8x8 RGB matrix in every channel, which is great for metering and stuff. There we only get the new production run of new tiles mid-September or so. No, the builder doesn't say so. It doesn't say, it doesn't count the estimated shipments date yet. This would be great, right? You use a certain tile and then it goes like, oh, that's September now. Right. But we're not there yet. But it's great ideas, and thanks for pushing us. We want to achieve it. We want to actually go there.
Yeah. Next question.
From Mickey Control in Manila, Philippines. Who manufactures the faders and encoders that you use? Any thoughts on having Penny and Giles faders as an option?
Yeah, we are getting requests for all kinds of specialty parts. Penny and Giles are certainly nice faders, but they have like 4 or 5 different families. So whichever one we would decide on, there would be someone saying, no, the other family is much better. Why don't you take the other one? It's very hard for us. We have standardized on the fader type, which is very popular. It's used in many devices. It's an Alps type, but it's not the Alps factory building this. It's the factory building this for Alps as well. So anyway, it's an Alps type fader. It's not the most. It's not the Rolls-Royce of the faders. It's the Volkswagen of the faders, if you like. Mm-hmm. If you really want us to ship a certain device, it's certain brands, certain thing of tactile, this would be a custom job. So we can do that because we manufacture everything ourselves. We have our own assembly machines. We assemble our own circuit boards. Our units are built in Germany, are made right here, right. And we even do all the electronics. So we don't stock boards, we stock parts, and we assemble those parts using our own pick and place machines and ovens and everything. So this is part of what we're doing. Else we couldn't do that. Else we would not be. I mean, this is nothing you can just order in bulks from Far East or something. It's not how you do this. So we are flexible. We are developers, and we are production people. So, and we've been doing this for like 2 decades, doing like such development services too. So yes, we can customize if you have a very specific requirements and you don't expect us to get it off the shelf. You could get in touch and we could look at such a thing.
That's great. Next question.
Next question from Mickey Control in Manila, Philippines. He says, will we see you at IBC 2022 at the Hall 8, booth 8.A8?
Yes. Thank you. Absolutely. We'll be there. We hope to see you as well. If you manage to make it to Amsterdam.
We have a film crew, so I think that we'll probably send some folks over to your booth to get another pass at the product.
Yes, please. We have some good stuff to show and good guys around, and yeah, so great. Yes, please come by.
That's great. Frank, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah. Thanks so much for your curiosity.
Really exciting product.
Opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, we're really excited about your product. So I'm really looking forward to more and for us to test it and figure out how to tie it into Zoom and all the other hardware that we have and everything else. It's just really, really fantastic. And thanks to our producers who asked all the questions, really, really great questions, kept the conversation going first hour and second hour. And thanks to our panelists. Of course, we can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team in the back end making this whole thing happen. It's a global team all over the world, cutting the show, talking about it, prepping people like Frank as they come in, managing the comms, managing all the bits and pieces. There's a lot of people involved in the back end, and you'll see them here in just a second, of who's involved with producing this. And so really, really great work. And tomorrow, Josh will be back, and I'll be back. I'll be in the panel. I love being in the panel instead of the host. So Josh will be running, and we'll be doing 2 hours of Q&A. So stay tuned for that. And now we'll see you in after hours. Thanks again, Frank.
Thank you.
You look like Rick Wakeman.
One that I can shock Mitchell when he doesn't whisper at the end. Just push the little button. That's what I need. Like whisper.
Thanks.
You're ruining the mood, Mitchell.
What's that? What am I doing?
You're ruining the mood. This is a whisper only zone. Sorry.
Okay.
That's not whispering. That's just talking low.
See you guys. Thanks.